Ahoy! Headhunter! What's up, everybody? Joel Algie here with the Headhunter Hideout, and I'm excited today. I've got a really great guest, Melissa King, and she's got her website, melissaking.com, right? That's the website?
King Melissa.
King Melissa. Okay. So Melissa King was taken. I think I actually, when I went up and looked, I was kind of confused originally. So kingmelissa.com, and Melissa has been in recruiting for a number of years here, and really has a really strong finance background, and then transitioned into recruiting. But she also helps people on both sides. So not just clients that are looking for people, but she helps job seekers with their resume. And so really excited to just talk about some of the recruiting challenges, what we're seeing in recruiting right now, and then just hear a little bit too about the candidate side and what candidates can be doing. So, Melissa, welcome to the show. I'm glad we were able to make this happen. And we were just talking before the show, though. We're experiencing very different climates here. So I'm in the middle of autumn, and apparently you're still in the middle of summer where you're at.
Yeah, just a little bit too hot still. It's probably, the midst of summer everywhere else in the country, and we're just so excited that it's getting below 100. So,
which is, that is pretty wild. So I'm just gonna take a look here. So it looks like we got about 10 people live right now. So welcome to everybody who's out there. I just want to remind everybody that if you have questions that Melissa can answer around recruiting or job seeking, feel free to comment, and we'll be able to address those if you have comments. So Michael already just says hi. So hi to you, Michael. Hi to everyone else who's out there. So Melissa, I'm curious. Tell us a little bit about what you're specifically doing right now with recruiting, and I'd love to just hear kind of what you're experiencing right now with everything that's going on, and kind of the changes that you've experienced in the last couple months.
Yeah, super interesting year for all of us in recruiting, right?
Yeah.
I think at the beginning of it, when you were losing jobs because you didn't know everybody's just either getting laid off or something, the company not really sure which way to go, jobs getting canceled left and right. So we had to go through so many challenges in that for this entire year. And then just, getting into several months later, you still have those ebbs and flows where, was it this week, I think, a bunch of new companies announcing their layoffs that they're going to be doing. So It really just sets us into so many roller coasters for this year. But I think right at the end of summer, you started seeing more hiring going on. But then I also noticed where you've got now companies that are really taking on the challenge of doing their own internal hiring. I saw a lot of postings throughout LinkedIn. Maybe
tons of posting. Yeah.
And I don't necessarily agree with them, because you've got all of these, maybe a CEO, CMO, or whatever, giving their 2 cents worth on how they were so proud that they were doing massive interviews left and right, and finding candidates, just super simple. But when you really read through some of it, they're really taking away from the job experience, or at least looking through and finding that opportunity. So maybe the way that they went about it, like I saw some posting out there where a fellow was sending candidates links where they had to create a video and answer 5 questions and then send it back. It really takes away from the candidate experience, because one, they're not getting to learn anything about the company. You're just only judging them based off of some questions. So, and then, people bragging that they've got 300 plus applicants applying to every job, but you're not even, really getting through, I don't think, all of those applicants, where when you're using a third party recruiter, we're always talking with candidates. Always. We don't just go through 1 or 2 and say, let's talk with that one, because we see every candidate as somebody that has value that could be used for many companies. It may not be that current job, but a lot of different companies out there.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like the idea of some of these companies thinking that they can just jump in and really get through it, it's not realistic. And then how are you supposed to do your own job if you are that person? So I saw a lot of that where companies were feeling like they could just do everything on their own. And I mean, we're professionals. It's like you hire an attorney to go ahead and do certain things for you. We really have that same thing. We're experts. We can determine quickly who's going to be a fit. We know what skills mean. We don't have to, keep going through. We're just so experienced with this. And I think that maybe this summer there was a lot of being underutilized in terms of us third-party recruiters out there.
Well, it's. I think you just experienced a real shift from, talent scarcity and people not applying to jobs, and then suddenly you get an influx. And I think the challenge is when you get an influx of resumes and influx of information, it's a job in itself going through and figuring out, well, who meets the qualifications. And then if you only interview 2% of those people, you have 98% of those people never getting an email or never getting any response back. So it creates a whole new challenge. And in some ways, you'd probably be better not actually posting the job and just going to a recruiter, because they're going to be able to save face from all of these Dear Hiring Manager stories. And, the recruiter ghosted me. It's like, if they get 100,000 people applying for a job or something, a huge amount of people applying for jobs, it's going to be hard. You're going to drop the ball. And in some ways, it'd be better just to be a little bit more incognito and maybe work with the recruiter, save that time just sifting through and figuring it out. And at the end of the day, I think, it's like, again, I think the easy apply button was great, 6 months ago, when you wanted to make it really easy for people to apply because there wasn't really anyone out there. But now it's like, if there's so many people, it's hard work, because as a job seeker, you are just pressing the button, and it's frustrating, and you're going, this is supposed to be easy. This sucks. So we've actually got a couple of questions here. So first of all, Sultan said hi. He says, hi, Joel. Hi, Melissa. So Abdul, always good to see you, man. You're a great supporter on LinkedIn. And then Adja said, I've been applying for jobs for 3 months now. I've received rejections, ghosting. I don't know how to clear the ATS system. I never know what's wrong with my CV. Maybe we could throw some light on that. So maybe that's something we could talk about in a moment, but I want to come back to that. And then, man, we got a lot of comments here. So Larry just said, I can't believe we're heading for a new lockdown. Don't necessarily want to go down that direction with this conversation, but it's obviously a lot of crazy things going on right now, which is affecting. And Michael just said, do you think the upcoming elections in the U.S. is going to have an impact on employment? So yeah, I'd actually love to hear what your take on that is, just in terms of, have you seen, maybe in the last month or so, a little bit more hesitation with hiring, or people saying, let's just wait till we know what's going on with the election? What has that come into play at all, or what have you found?
Not even just on the employer who has an open job, but a candidate, maybe not. Okay, let's go with the candidate that's already employed, that's maybe looking for a new opportunity or thinking about it. They're becoming a little bit more hesitant, right?
Sure.
Because maybe having those thoughts of, well, what's going to happen here in the next couple months in that shift. So even job seekers, I think, are just going through a shift of, is this really the right time as we're coming into this, one of probably the biggest election in history, to make that switch? And I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I think that personally, you may not have too many issues when we're going from a job to a job, that it still is just a political thing versus a personal thing. There could be potential effects out there. But I see so much hesitation with the job seekers, not necessarily wanting to make that shift right now because of where we're at.
Yeah.
I don't know that I so much agree with that. I think that it's still, I think that we're still in, just like any other year, when you get into the end of the year, it still is a good time to make a job switch. We've got, budgets that are closing out for the year, so they've got to get those jobs hired off. So if you start looking at it and thinking about it like that, and taking out the politics from it, I really think you should be okay. But at the end of the day, I mean, who doesn't have a lot of questions upcoming?
Yeah. And then I know I was actually in a local university, and we were talking about LinkedIn, but one of the questions that came up was, should I be connecting and networking with people while I have a job that's safe? And I said, hold on. Like, if there's one thing this last period of time has taught us, is there is no safe job. So although you might think, well, this job's just so safe and it's secure, it's really not. And then that we should know that by now. But then it's, to your point, it's like, if a great opportunity comes along, or there's a great opportunity with a company and it aligns with your values and your mission, regardless of what's going on and what external factors there are, it could still be a great position. I just think that a lot of people are like more just hesitant, I think, with maybe just wanting to make that change. But again, it's like you gotta weigh out everything. And I think now, hopefully, maybe that notion of, this job's super secure and they've got my back forever type notion, hopefully that's kind of going away, because I think a lot of times people are held in positions then, and they're stopping themselves from advancing because of these fears as well. So let's see, we got another question here too. It just says, how have you managed clients cutting rates based upon remote work? How do you explain to a candidate that they no longer need a commute? The skills are no valued as they were prior to COVID. It's an interesting one. Any light on that one? On that question?
So the beginning of it was cutting rates, like meaning, what does it say? How have you managed clients cutting rates based off of? So cutting rates, we're talking about paying less in salary.
Yeah, it sounds like that's paying less in salary. So maybe you're being paid less.
Yeah.
Like kind of an hourly contract rate.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've seen where you've got some of these hiring managers coming in and just saying, well, I can offer this job at the low end of what the entire base range was, which, I mean, at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, we were going to see another 5% increase in salaries.
Yeah.
19 was great. And so that kind of bothered me, where I was seeing some managers that were saying, well, I've got a lot of options out there, so I'm going to pay a little bit less on the salary. And then you're having to have these difficult conversations with the hiring manager of, well, but okay, if you do that, then you're still going to run the risk of the candidate's going to stay on the job market. They're going to tell you that they're not looking, but they're still going to keep looking because you've undercut them. And so why even do that to begin with?
Short-term thinking, it sounds like.
Yeah, you're not thinking long-term. And then if you're going to judge somebody that, maybe they don't have the best tenure, and then still undercut them, well, of course they're probably going to leave soon. Yeah, what do you expect if you're not going to be competitive with your rates? There may not be as many jobs out there, but they're still going to look.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's there was a post going around where, like, I think it was something to do with like, if it's a hiring manager or a boss, if you're like telling people they're lucky to have a job right now and kind of playing these psychological tips. And I think there is a lot of that going around, and but that's supply and demand as well. So I think that's part of play. If you feel like I've got 300 people applying to the job every day, then I now I have the power, and I can play. Where 6 months ago it was like, man, the candidates were the ones that were driving everything, and if they made 10,000 more than the max, that companies would consider that. But I think it was short-sighted thinking then from candidates, because now they're the people who are getting axed right away because they were getting paid a lot of money as well. So I think it's like understanding like what's your fair rate and what are you worth, but then understanding the times as well. So if you're coming into a job and you're paid more than your boss or you're paid more than anyone else, you better be doing a great job, or it's just, when something does change and turn, you could be that first person out because you're just getting paid more than everyone else. So, so let's talk a little bit. I'm curious about kind of your way into recruiting, because you're in banking for a long time. So how did you go? because I was in banking myself, so I know a little bit about the world. I know you were probably in kind of more kind of corporate banking and the treasury world and a different side, but it seems like, you know, once people are in banking, they kind of just keep on going that direction. So how did you make that switch, and what was it that kind of caused that change?
Yeah. I mean, isn't it the question that all recruiters have is, how did you become a recruiter?
How did you fall into it? Yeah.
We all have some strange story out there. So yeah, I mean, I worked at American Express, Wells Fargo, Chase. I mean, you can't get any bigger than those banks. But I was with Chase. I had lost my job with them, and in the Phoenix market, it's very few business lines that are actually here that are relative to what my background was. So I had an opportunity to go across the country, but I didn't do that. And so, you know, essentially I was just jobless. And I was working with a bunch of recruiters in Phoenix. In Phoenix, it's called Recruiter Row because you've got all the recruiters right there. You know, all the big ones, Randstad, Robert Half, Parker Lynch, all of them. And so, you know, of course, I'm meeting with the recruiters, and one of them is asking me if I ever thought about being a recruiter. And I'm like, no, never thought about that. I don't know if I want to do that. But then
does anybody ever answer that question? Like, yeah, I've always dreamed. Oh my gosh. Now that you say it, I've always dreamed of being a recruiter. No.
Right. Exactly. Since I was a wee tiny girl.
Yeah.
So I just started meeting with more recruiters, and I was also feeling really defeated in my job search because I had more of a specific background, and Phoenix is not a massive banking world. You know, I already worked at the big ones, so what was I going to do? So a lot of that defeating feeling going on. So I know what it's like when you feel defeated in the job search. I know how painful it can be. It's like you go into an interview and you think you kill it, and then you find out, nope, they don't want you. And you start questioning your abilities. Do I know anything? But so I came across Randstad and, you know, was offered a position recruiting. Of course, I started with meeting the other recruiters at other agencies, and I started kind of evaluating them like, I can do this. And so went to work for Randstad. You know, I think Randstad is still the second largest staff globally.
Yeah, that's huge.
And yeah, I excelled. I loved it, and I excelled. I was recruiting mainly for finance and accounting, which is what my background was. So it was really, really easy to target good candidates in that field. And it was fun. Like, I'm in this whole new world. I think that being a recruiter, honestly, is quite enjoyable and fun. You get to just meet tons of new people on the recruiting side when you're talking with candidates. And it's an ever learning process too. I'm always learning about new things that are within a job. So I really fell into it, but it was fantastic. And, you know, the fact that I excelled so well in it, I thought that was fantastic. And then eventually just decided I'm going to go off on my own and do this. And, you know, it's been super successful. So I love it.
So I'm curious, like, out of all the big, you know, the big names in town, why did you choose Randstad? I mean, I take it you were kind of maybe interviewing some of the others. Like, was there anything particular about Randstad that you were just like, man, I love what they're doing, and I'd love to be a part of what they're doing?
I mean, probably the guy that was the managing director of the office was just super great. Loved him to death. And then one of the other guys that I had met with were, you know, really welcoming. And so I think that, you know, when somebody makes you feel like you're important, then you feel more welcomed with them. So I would definitely say it was between the two managers that were there that at the time really made me feel welcomed. And I'm still good friends with the one. He moved on before I had left, but such a great guy. And I feel like taught me everything that I know, was a great influence.
And it's funny because I think, I think we all talk about this, like as recruiters, like when you're talking to another recruiter, that, we're just so aware that to the outside world, recruiters are the worst people ever and everybody kind of bashes them. But like within our industry, there's amazing people, and there are people that genuinely want to mentor, they want to teach, they want to actually help people. And so I think when you actually run into someone like that, your experience is completely different. But there's obviously a lot of people that'll get into the recruiting world and it's sink or swim, and you don't necessarily find that person who it does have compassion and really cares and wants to kind of help you out. So so you were with Randstad for a couple of years, and then you went and started your own shop. So walk us through that. Like how did you get to that point, and was there like a one tipping point, or was it like a process? How did that kind of end up happening?
It was a process. You've got your non-compete to deal with. And so really, honestly, for the first several months, I was kind of on the down low in terms of not really too many people knowing that I was out there doing this. I hadn't posted a lot of stuff out there that I was doing this. And I wasn't out there targeting people that were on my non-compete, but just really keeping me on the down low for a while, because you've got things like the non-compete. And so as a little bit—
Were you still doing like banking then and finance, or were you like, I need to get out of that world completely because of the non-compete?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I wanted to start venturing out. And so I did expand and start getting into sales and marketing and IT, and a little bit of HR. But then now my niche, really where I love and I think I've excelled at is, I guess, two places. So what I love to do is, partner with some of the smaller to mid-sized companies across the U.S. that have a broader need, which could encompass finance and accounting, sales and marketing, IT, something or other. But, you're essentially doing everything for that company in particular. So that I love the fact of, working across the U.S. is now something I do, and it's easy. And I learned about so many new things out there, but getting in this one kind of mid-sized market where you don't have to go through an RFP process or, a vendor, I'm not a current vendor, all of that stuff when you start getting in with the bigger companies. But interestingly, I still am working with, massive publicly traded companies that are here in the U.S. I've been lucky enough where I've had prior relationships with candidates who maybe have gone to some of these bigger companies and have called me. So I still like that. That always feels great when they're going with the boutique firm and not with the big monster firm out there.
But it also, I think to me, like that is all to do with, really your ability to then see people for who they are and not just for like a placement. Because obviously if it's, if you're good at keeping those relationships with candidates and maybe you work with them and it doesn't work out, if you actually keep that relationship going, eventually most people are going to get into a position where they're the hiring resource or they're the hiring manager and they're looking for a resource, someone to help. And, I think I think that's where the really great recruiters that just know how to care for people and actually keep those relationships, it does end up paying off, because obviously big companies, they always value relationships still. So even if you aren't working for one of the, Manpower, Randstad, any of these big companies, recruiting always relationships. So, that says a lot to me. That says a lot about like how you actually treat people. And it also shows that because there are a lot of people who, don't really care within recruiting, or maybe they don't do a great job with following through, or maybe they just don't think it matters in that moment. 5 years later, people will remember the really good experiences and they'll just think of you. And so I think that says a lot to me about like how you just handle relationships. And so do you find like with the career, with the resume writing, have you seen any correlation in there where like maybe you help someone with a resume and then 3 years later, they're in a position where they're a hiring manager? Does that kind of go hand in hand as well?
Yeah. And I think that's always been ongoing, whether it was something where I'm doing resume writing, but in the recruiting, just specifically alone, I'm a firm believer. The reason that we're reaching out to all 300 of those applicants versus maybe somebody internally, the internal recruiter, is because all of those people that we've reached out to, all 300 of them, they could be a fit for something else, or they could be a future hiring manager. And also, it doesn't mean that I need to place you in your job in order to be a resource for you, right? Like I tell people all the time when I'm talking with candidates that I've worked with, if you're just looking for an email and I'm not working with that company or something, give me a call. Like I can help you get emails, right? And so that's the relationship building of it. If I'm doing resume writing for somebody, or if I'm recruiting, whatever it might be, don't think of me as just the person that will call you when I have a job. Definitely use my resource, right?
I love
I've got a vast amount of emails available. I can find emails easily. So I want that relationship to truly be a relationship so that they can see me not just as a recruiter, but as a true resource for them.
I think that's huge. And, I think that's where, a lot of people have that idea of it's the quickest way to the money. It's the quickest moment, like, can I capitalize on this person in the moment? And I think you obviously just caring about people, but then becoming that resource, it's huge. And I think long-term, I would tell anybody who's just starting in recruiting, like the biggest pressure is like, you want to make the deals and you want to be worth something. You want to prove that you can do it. But the reality is like some people, I mean, you can get lucky too as well. Like you can have things go your way and that's great, but it's like long term, like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, the way that you become the person that people think about is doing exactly what you're saying. And it's being a resource no matter what. And so I haven't heard that one though. I love that you say like, hey, if you need an email or you need to get a hold of somebody, come to me. Like I have, I've got strategies. I think to me that's huge because it's especially recently I've seen a lot of people just lost and going, I've been furloughed, I've lost my job, I haven't been on a job market for 20 years. Everything is electronic. So I'm sure if you're able to say, look, let me walk you through this strategy, let me show you what to do. That's huge. People don't forget that. I mean, I wouldn't forget that. I'm going to go to that person and want to help them out down the line when I'm able to, and I'm in that position. So tell me a little bit about your writing as well. So you do some writing, like how did you kind of get into writing articles and social media and doing what you do on LinkedIn as well? What kind of inspired you to start doing that?
Yeah, that was a big shift this year for sure. LinkedIn, I mean, it's such a great free place for advice. And so I think I really started recognizing that recruiters, all they're pretty much doing is saying, I've got a controller job in whatever city paying this, waiting for candidates to see that. But this year with everything, I mean, I guess I took it to where, wait a minute, if we've got tons and tons of candidates out there that are lost, they haven't written a resume in 10 years, they don't know how to do a job search, I'm going to be one of the people that give free advice out there and just say, here's how you do it.
Yeah.
Hopefully people can learn from it. And it's been extremely positive for me too, because I've received so many messages from people that have said, I follow your posts and I did what you said and I ended up finding a job. So I think if more recruiters maybe just gave a little bit of advice, it doesn't have to be often, but just a little bit of advice on how to do a positive job search, we could get some of these people back to work too, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not getting paid from that, and I'm not actually getting anything from it other than I have paid it forward and I've helped all of these millions of people that are out of work, struggling and trying to figure it out. Because I mean, as recruiters, we're not going to place every single person all the time. So the more that you can at least teach somebody how to do this job search or whatever it might be, finding emails, whatever, how to do the resume, how to do a cover letter for free, then we're going to get more people back to work. I don't think it takes away from my personal business if I'm giving out free advice. And I don't know about anyone else, but it still makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside when somebody messages you and says that they found a job or they changed a job or got 30% more increase in pay because of something that you wrote out there.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think that's a part of, I think a lot of people don't actually see, especially if you're putting out content a lot, and whether it's an inspiring message, something motivational, or something practical that people can do. You see the engagement maybe on the platform, you can see the warm messages, but I mean, the best messages are the ones where it's like the person hasn't even liked a comment and they just say, hey, I actually really needed this today. Or like that, like to your point, this actually helped me. And I think, that becomes then a motivator where you're like, okay, this is actually why I do it. Like, we're obviously we're not like Instagram where you're getting paid to put a post out. But it's about becoming that resource, like you said, and becoming that person that people associate with. I can actually learn from this information. It's going to help me. And I think that's what building a brand is as well. And for some reason, I think in the recruiting industry, we're a little bit behind with that. Same with like the bank. I think of like banking industry. There's a lot of industries that are kind of behind on that. So I love that that's your mentality too. And I think one thing that you said, which I think is massive, is, it's actually giving that value away for free and realizing that it does actually come back. And that is how we should be. And particularly in recruiting, because hopefully most recruiters who are doing well are making money, and it's great. And you're helping people out. And I think even more so, it should be more of an incentive to give out that value and help people. So are you writing too? Are you doing articles in other places as well, or is it just mainly LinkedIn, or what are the platforms are you posting content and doing writing, or what else are you involved in?
So the Forbes Council, I'm on that. There's a lot of expert panels that are within there, and I have an article that will probably be published pretty soon.
Cool.
And so I'll probably start doing an article a month with Forbes.
Awesome.
And I mean, that was, I thought that was just fantastic this year when I got to become a part of Forbes Council. Who doesn't want that? I know I was always reading their articles, and
that's awesome.
Great. Yeah,
it's great to become that. So is that going to be more like a recruitment focused or kind of candidate focused? What's kind of the focus there?
Honestly, everywhere.
Cool.
I really want to take the opportunity over the next several months to kind of look at it in a few different ways. Maybe, 1 month could be towards recruiting, the next month about more just specifics on resumes or just more coaching experiences out there. So definitely a good combo. That's what I want to be able to do is, and write stuff that people can really find value from, not just, I'm not the person that likes to do all the bragging efforts at all. I really want it to have some kind of value where somebody learns something from it and can use that information.
I love that. Yeah. And then we think, it's easy to do that on social media too. And I think everybody, there's always that temptation and to be able to do that. But I think the heart behind it is if you do want to bring value, then that's actually going to make an impact. And we got Kelsey here says, hey all. So Kelsey, great to see you as well. And I'm curious, just in terms of what you've seen maybe with resumes recently, or just even like kind of the mindset that people have when they come to you. What do you kind of see a common thread of like what people are struggling with most, or does it kind of vary from person to person?
That's a great question. I guess I would have to go with, it does vary, more industry to industry. For instance, like sales and marketing people have, a lot of different ways of doing their resumes than what you would see on a finance and accounting person.
Yeah.
And so I think as I'm doing those resumes, I've really got to be focused on where it's going to be the most useful for them, how the formatting should be. But to your point, a lot of people just really forget to even proofread, right? No matter what resume we're talking about, little tiny things. Maybe you should have capitalized something, the grammar. And I was talking about this the other day, and somebody was saying, well, that's just a given, so that's always done. I'm like, well, actually, it's not. I would say that what happens is you're sitting at home, you're doing your resume, you've maybe spent 2 hours trying to write it, and then you think you're done with it, so you just put it to the side, and then you never actually went back and proofread it, and then you just start sending it out. So I think it's best that, if you are going to tackle your own resume, spend that time on it, but definitely go back and maybe print it off and really read it a few hours later, not right then.
Yeah. Give it to someone else too. If you, your spouse or family member, someone that you trust, or a friend, like someone that does a lot of hiring. Cause I used to see that all the time in construction. It'd be like detail oriented and detail spelled wrong. Like, okay, no, or just be like super organized. And then you just see like a really unorganized resume. And, personally, I don't put a lot of weight in the resume, but the thing is it's like, it's one of those things where if you have a mistake on there, it will kill you right away. And if it's visible, it just, I've never seen a hiring manager go, oh yeah, I love this guy. Look at those spelling mistakes. But it's like one of those things where if it's perfect, no one cares. Like if it doesn't have it, but if it has a mistake, they really care. So it's like, it's more of a case of just like, give people the reason to want to have a conversation and not just to get you out of there. So I think that happens a lot.
I think right now too is if we go back to the 300 plus applicants that are applying for jobs out there, one of the biggest issues is, how are you going to stand out against those 300 applicants? So one of the things that I really like to do, again, depending on your industry and all that, is making it so that we've got a super easy format for the reader to follow along with. I mean, we know based off of statistics and whatnot that our eyes follow along in a certain way. And so, do as much as you can to think about this in the reader format, right? Like we know that nobody wants to read a full paragraph on a resume, but when we start seeing bullet points and, maybe more targeted words that are catchy and catch your eye, we can get through it faster. We can absorb more. We didn't actually have to read the whole thing. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I provide to people when I'm doing that, is just helping it to be a better format, so that when we're taking in the readers, when we're thinking about the reader reading it, they can absorb more. Because I think you and I both know most hiring managers aren't really taking the time to read through a resume. And they're looking at, simple things like title, the dates worked there. But I want them to see key points, not just a title. And so that adds in, I think, a lot of value to it. And that's one of the things I like to teach people too.
This is an interesting question. Visual CV is more important instead of text-based CV. So like I haven't seen photo-based CV is encouraged in Ireland. Thoughts? I've always told people, like, you don't need to have picture on there or anything like that. It should just be text, right? I mean, am I right there, or is any other thoughts on that? Get rid of the pictures?
Don't put your picture on there. But now, to this person's point, though, I do see it a whole lot more in the marketing space.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
Younger folks in the marketing space, they do it a whole lot more. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, all right, that makes sense. So again, going back to what space you're in, but I don't know that I would see it beyond the marketing space either.
Yeah, if I put my face on there, I know I'm not getting the call back. So.
But
it's the same with like LinkedIn, I think, where it's like, number one tip is just make sure your picture is professional. But to me, what's even more a big deal is like, just make sure like you look like engaging and like you want to connect with people.
Happy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's those little tweaks. But I saw a resume floating around a while back, which was like this. I think it was like a new style of resume, and it got ripped to pieces because, you know, a lot of these ATS, it's like text form. So what do you just advise people to like kind of keep it as simple as possible and just clear, concise, organized? I mean, what's the advice you're typically giving out with, you know, these fancy resumes that we're starting to see more and more?
Oh, I am not a big fan of super fancy fluff filibuster.
Yeah.
Again, it's got to be where the reader can easily get some information from it. They don't want to read a book. So sometimes I have a lot of candidates that will email me, or just people that will email me a resume that they just got from another resume writer. And I just look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, it's too much.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to take that much time. The resume's got to be short, sweet. It's got to be targeted, and you've got to have keywords that we can visually get to quickly through it. Beyond that,
it's kind of the same with LinkedIn content. You know, it's like I tell people all the time, like, you know, have the shorter things. Like, it's not because I enjoy short points. I personally, like, I don't think it even looks that great, but it is easier. Yeah. And first thing that happens to me is if I'm scrolling through anything, if I see a huge block, I'm just like, oh, I don't have the energy, which is sad that we're at that point. Yeah. But it's the same with a resume. It's like, if I can see the bullet points and it just goes, this is what I did, this is what I did, this is what I did. I go, okay, now I know what you do. Yeah. Instead of a paragraph at the beginning that's like, you know, in 1972, I was born. You know, it's like, just keep it sweet, keep it simple.
Yeah. And so, you know, one of my big things out there too is, you know, dating ourselves on our resumes. That, you know, the term that I'm just not a fan of is a seasoned professional with 25 plus years. All right. I mean, that's great. You're probably super wise, but you know, those seasoned and dating yourself like that in this day and age could really just be a big damper to you. So I like to pull out some of those things so that we're not prejudging people as a hiring manager that, well, you know, I think that it's just more important that we are signifying all of our relevant experience versus
100%.
Yeah.
No, I think that's I mean, it's a huge issue too. And it's I talked to someone a while ago and they were like, well, I want to be myself in the resume. And I was like, yeah. I hear that as well, but you also want the interview, and you got to understand like how the hiring process works, where it's like usually you don't meet with the hiring manager right away unless it's a smaller company. Usually it's third-party recruiter or applicant, however you applied, and then it's the corporate recruiter. And so the idea of the corporate recruiter, it's like they're kind of like a screening process. Like you got to get through them. And I've had people just like, they're like, yeah, I can't get past that corporate recruiter. And I'm like, they're not like your enemy and they're not like out to get you, but it's like, you just to be wise, like with the things that you're saying, and be short and concise and realize it's part of the process. The actual person that you need to talk to is the hiring manager, but you have to get through this person. And I think somebody just, I can't remember the exact phrase, but I think it was like, I just want to be myself. And I'm like, it's great to obviously be yourself, but it matters more being yourself with the hiring manager than it does with the corporate recruiter, because the corporate recruiter isn't going to be the one you're working with every day. And it's the same with your resume. It's just, it's such great advice. And I think it's hard because there is contradictory advice out there, but I think you have to go to those people who have that proven track record as well. So, and we've got some comments here. So obviously your cat came through. Now everybody wants to see your cat. So Kelsey and Abdul, they want to see your cat. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but they're calling for it. Ah, just chilling, just hanging.
Yep. That's my boy.
There you go. He's just hanging out. So how does he do with the heat? Is he just inside all the time?
Well, I don't let the cats outside ever because we have too many coyotes and javelinas.
Sure.
But he likes the heat, actually. I'll let him on the patio and they'll sit in the sun. Not when it's too hot, but
Yeah.
when it's semi-hot.
Well,
He does
awesome.
prefer heat.
Well, thanks for yeah, like I said, there's this whole it's like 10 comments here about the cat. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but okay, so I'm looking at your website right now, kingmelissa.com. Is that the best place for people to get a hold of you, or how should people get a hold of you to work with you for the coaching and resume writing? Like, is that the best place, or do you prefer people to reach out to LinkedIn? Like, how's the best place to get a hold of you?
I've got it set up so that from the website, they can click and easily do an email to email me.
Okay.
But, on LinkedIn, both on my company page and my personal page, I list out my email address and my phone number too. So
Cool.
And I guess between that email, LinkedIn message, you could text me, call me, and then of course, anything else that you feel like. But I do try to make it pretty accessible so that on the website you can just click and send an email, and other places, and be completely available to everybody.
Love it. Awesome. Well, yeah, I'd say anyone who's out there that's having a problem with getting interviews, getting jobs. That's why I always tell people, I'm like, you can tell if your resume is not great because you're probably not getting interviews. But maybe you're getting in a lot of interviews and you're not getting the job. Then it's a question with interviewing. So I think, if you're having any of those issues, reach out to Melissa. You can go to her website, go to LinkedIn. And when did you say that article was coming out on Forbes? That's later this month?
Probably, what are we in, October 9th? I would say probably November, the mid-November it might come out.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that. I'm sure you'll share it on LinkedIn as well, and we'll get to see that. And I guess let's focus on the recruiting here, because I know obviously you do both sides. But if one of the things that I like to just ask people, and I asked the last guest this as well, and a couple of the others, but if you were just starting in recruiting today, and maybe you've been at your firm for 3 to 6 months, and you're just feeling like down and you're not figuring out the system, like what advice would you give to somebody that's maybe having a challenging time, particularly with the pandemic? What advice would you give a recruiter who's in that situation?
Yeah, I did a lot of training when I was at Randstad for the new people that came. So, regardless of the climate that you're in, because honestly, it's not that bad of a climate right now to become a third-party recruiter. I think we saw a lot of large recruiting firms having to lay off, and so it kind of did thin out the recruiting industry a little bit. But at the end of the day, if you are able to have solid conversations with people, you can talk about the weather with people. You can just make that small talk with them. Obviously, as recruiters, we need to pick up the phone. We need to send out emails. We need to engage. The more effort that you put into it, then the more you're going to get back. But you can't be afraid of rejection, and you can't be afraid to pick up the phone, right? Just try to make conversations with the people, and it doesn't have to be robotic. People are people, right? Who did you call? What company are they with? How are they handling things? Do they have a pet at home? Make the small talk with people, but just feel engaging with them. Treat them like they're just some other person out there. It doesn't matter if you're talking to a CEO or a low-level hiring manager. We're all just people at the end of the day. And I think if you are just capable of having real conversations with people, you don't need to just quickly be able to have a success story, but you do need to be able to have successful conversations ongoing, because those successful conversations ongoing will eventually turn into them calling you back, right? It's a cycle. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is, and going back to our thing about interviewing all of those 300 applicants, but what I'm always telling new people is that every candidate is going to be a hiring manager, and every hiring manager is going to be a candidate. So the more that we are engaging with all of the applicants and with everyone out there, it's a pay it forward thing. They're going to come back to you when they feel like you treated them well and when they felt like you had an engaging conversation with them. It doesn't have to be an immediate something. This is all long term. This is all relationship building and just being successful at how you talk with people.
Yeah, well, that's awesome advice, and obviously, I can just tell by just even how you are on the show and by your content that you're a genuine person. You care about people, and I think it's like there's a lot of you got to have high energy in this job at times, and you've got to be able to push yourself through. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's visualizing things as you're just connecting with people at the end of the day, and so I love that. So I highly advise anybody, if you're not connected to Melissa, send her a connection request, follow her content, and if you are in that bucket where maybe you need some fresh recruiting help, reach out to her. If you need help with your resume, reach out to her. And I would just say, in general, reach out to Melissa. She's great, and we really appreciate you coming on to the show. I really appreciate you coming on to the show, and hopefully we can follow up in a year from now and just kind of hear how the writing's going and where we're at as well. So this definitely won't be the last time, but I appreciate you hopping on today.
Thanks, Joel. I mean, tons of fun. Loved it.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna end this broadcast if you just stay on for a couple seconds here.
Sure.